This is Recovery Lifestyles with Carmel. Here at Recovery Lifestyles, we are committed to raising awareness and ending stigmas surrounding addiction and mental health. On today's show, I'll be speaking with Tristan Sophia, who has a doctorate in psychology and is board certified in life coaching. Tristan works with female coaches and healers to attain a CEO mindset and fearlessly share their story so they can stand out from the crowd. Hi, Tristan. Thanks for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing well, Carmel. How are you today?
I'm great after the just previous coughing attack that we just currently had on line here. We might as well just share why we're laughing. Today's topic, I guess you and I both have a lot of experience with. We have personal experience. We have educated experience. We have it's something that I think you and I are both passionate about, and I'm just so grateful to have you here to talk about it. So did you want to share with our audience what our topic is?
Yes, thank you for having me on again. And you are right on. This topic is something near and dear to both our hearts. And yeah, we wanted to talk about narcissism today and what it looks like, and hopefully how to deal with it when you come across somebody who has those characteristics.
So, and Tristan, you have a doctorate in psychology, so you also have an educated, I wanted to say bias on this.
Absolutely.
So you're not only coming from a personal experience and a passion to help others on this is something that you're educated in. So is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think what we talked about and what we're going to try to do is not talk from some high psychological level today, but just talk, two people together who have experience in this area and talk in a way that people can understand and relate to, maybe even for themselves or someone they know. Just talk in a really hopefully everyday language about a topic that, a lot of people hear about, but I'm not sure how much a lot of people know about it.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I was just reading a statistic that people in recovery are actually at a higher or have had higher rates, I guess, of being involved with people who are narcissistic, whether it was being raised by a narcissistic parent or having a relationship with someone or maybe having a sibling with somebody. We seem to be targets for this.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you and I can relate to that. Both of us can.
Yeah, so let's get into it. What is narcissism?
Okay. Yeah, so I think what people think of most when they hear narcissism, I think, is self-centeredness, which we all have, right? We're all self-centered to some degree, and I think it's really important to remember for all of these characteristics, they're on a range, they're on a continuum. Somebody can have the characteristic of being self-centered, but is it at a 1 or is it at a 10? Is it extreme and it affects every area of their life, or does it just come, into their life occasionally? So all of these things are on a continuum. But self-centeredness, I would say, would be like a primary characteristic.
Okay. And so what are self-centeredness? What are the type of behaviors that tend to, because I feel narcissism is like a sneaky, it's one of those sneaky types of personalities.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be sneaky, and it takes, sometimes people can be really, you can meet them and think, oh my God, they're so narcissistic. And then somebody you would have to know for maybe 6 months, and then you're like, you know what? I think that person's totally narcissistic. Right. I've had those experiences before. So just, everything relates to them.
Yeah.
I mean, this characteristic permeates all other characteristics of somebody with narcissism. So when you're talking to them, they have a really difficult time putting themselves in your shoes and having a conversation where they ask you questions about yourself. It seems like they always gear the conversation towards themselves. And, if you're going through something, if you're having a hard time with something, they have a lot of trouble showing or experiencing empathy.
Mm-hmm.
If they do express it, you might get the feeling that it's really superficial and that it's more of a shallow experience that they're having and not like an actual empathic experience with what you're going through.
Yeah. So would you say that somebody who tends to, you could have quite a traumatic experience and they brush it off like it's not a big deal? Is that a really good sign? Yeah.
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 Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you think about, someone who's really warm in your life and caring, you can say, because like you said, it can be very subtle and sneaky. And so a lot of times we have to step back and say, am I really experiencing this? So if you can think of somebody who's really warm and caring towards you and think, would that person have given me that feeling? How would have that warm person responded? And that helps, to kind of get a foundation of what you're actually experiencing.
Mm-hmm. I think that, you talk about that sneaky piece, and I believe that from my own experience and from friends that I speak with, right, they may get into a relationship with somebody and this person seems like the perfect person, but there comes a time where they flip. And then all of a sudden you start thinking, is there something wrong with me? Right? And so how does somebody begin to recognize that? And if they are starting to recognize that, how do they leave that space of thinking they're crazy or maybe there's something wrong with them? Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is probably the prime experience that someone would have if they're in a relationship with a narcissistic person, is that questioning of, is this really happening? Are my feelings valid? Am I just being judgmental? Whatever those thoughts or feelings that you're having about questioning your experience. And, getting really in touch with your feelings and your intuition and learning to trust them, I think is vital. And that doesn't happen overnight, unfortunately. But if you have somebody that you trust and that you can really open up to and ask them their experience of this person, share what you're experiencing and start having a conversation about it, test it out with another person that you trust.
Well, and I think that when you're in that situation, how do you even trust anybody? Who do you know that's a safe person? Because sometimes that safe person ends up, not understanding because of the subtleness of the narcissism.
Yeah, the other person, I'm laughing because I've been in this situation before, and my friends have too, where, if you go to the person and not the person that you're talking about, that we were talking about, possibly another person that you go to that you trust, but the actual narcissistic person, a lot of times we'll go to that person and we'll say, hey, I'm having these feelings about such and such, or, well, you reacted, such and such a way. They're not going to have awareness of it. And so in general, you will come away from it questioning that person with more questions for yourself and doubting yourself. Yeah. So going to that person is not something that I recommend. They have an extreme lack of insight.
Mm-hmm. So, and it's actually the word that's coming up for me is that triangulation. When you're in your circle and maybe you're in a relationship or have been parented by somebody with this. And so it's such a long process. And the one person is not even aware of what is going on because they're favored or they're treated really well. And it's kind of like a pitting. So, it's really hard. It's a really difficult situation to get out of that darkness almost, and like find someone you trust. So do you recommend going to a professional if you have that awareness? Is that maybe the next step?
Well, sure. I mean, if someone is, having that experience and they feel like they want to consult with a professional, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So I think I think what it is that, if you're having that awareness and you're caught in the cycle and it's happening and you're reaching out to friends and they're not seeing it, but you keep thinking something's just off, then definitely it's time to seek out professional help.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point that you brought up, because a lot of times people with narcissism can present themselves as if they have it all together. Mm. And people who are not in their inner circle really don't have an awareness of that person's actual functioning or how they actually treat people.
Yeah. So how do you deal with a narcissist?
Excellent question.
So felt a little overwhelming.
How much time do we have? No.
Yeah.
I think what we talked about before, like going to a trusted friend, going to a professional, testing out your thoughts and feelings with, someone that you trust and or a professional, I think is a really good start. And it depends on where this person is in terms of their narcissism. Are they on the scale, on the scale of 1 to 10? Are they at a 10, a 5, or a 1? How much do you have in you to deal with this? Are these person's characteristics, how much are they affecting you? I think that is a really good place to start with. How extreme is this? And, if it's on the lower end of the scale, doing your own research, even going to therapy on how to deal with someone with narcissism in a relationship, even though if you want to stay in the relationship, there's ways to deal with them and work on yourself and work on your reactions that will make possibly the road smoother. And so some of those things are to, I always say, detach with love, to still be loving, kind, and respectful, but to not take things personal, to have a more objective and detached view of or reaction when that person is maybe starting to trigger you in some way.
How do you even go there? How do you even start?
That takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of work.
And what is that work? What is that? Learning to love yourself? Like, what is that work?
Yeah, absolutely. It has to do with self-care. And it has to do, all of this has to do with your own work on yourself, your own mindset work, because you have to understand you can't change the other person. Yeah. You can only change how you're going to react to that person. And so starting to realize your own worth and value, and that person cannot affect your worth and value because you know it deep down. Mm-hmm. And so then you can take a more, whatever that person's doing to trigger you or get you upset or whatever, that you can remain calm and respectful and kind and centered within yourself and respond to that person, not take things personally, but respond in a more detached way, but still kind, respectful, and loving. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of practice. It doesn't happen overnight. And it usually happens baby step by baby step.
Yeah. So in your more of an educated opinion, if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, is there hope? Do you believe that narcissists can change? Is that something they're capable of?
It depends. What it would depend on is if they realized what they're doing and they wanted to change, and then they got help.
Okay. That's pretty out there for someone who has narcissism. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that it's unlikely.
Yeah.
The people who have come to me for help with narcissism, they don't come into therapy and say, I need help because I have low self-esteem, ever. And that is the crux of their problem, is deep insecurity. So they're making up for it.
Right.
But they have no awareness that they have insecurity. Usually they would come into therapy and say, my wife isn't appreciating me. My children don't appreciate me. Things like that.
Right.
But again,
they are never the problem, right? It's always you. It's always the other person. They don't have the ability to see that, right? And that's part of the psychological wiring.
They have really strong defenses against feeling not good enough. And those defenses are so strong that they're unable to really see their part in a relationship. So they do have a low capacity for insight, but I wouldn't count them out entirely. I miracles happen. They really do. If someone perhaps is at risk of losing their family, and they commit themselves to doing therapy for 2 years every week, and they're willing to dive deep and look at themselves and trust the therapist, there's some progress that can be made, but the stars have to be aligned.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's take that out of the deep a little. We went pretty deep there. It's intense. So what is your favorite book on narcissism? I'm lightening up the conversation.
Okay, we'll see if this lightens it up.
Yeah.
So my favorite book I read when I was getting my master's, and it's by Alice Miller, and it's called Drama of the Gifted Child. And I am so glad that my professor had us read this book, because it literally changed my life. I literally sat up one entire night and read the entire book, and it explained a lot of things to me. It talked about how, as children, we are caregivers who are narcissistic, not everyone's, but certain children who have a narcissistic caregiver who's raising them. Some of those children become hypersensitive to other people's needs, and they in turn develop a false self because they become the person that they think the narcissistic person wants them to be. So then they avoid any chance of being abandoned or rejected. So wow. I'm getting kind of heavy. I know that's kind of heavy.
Our show is heavy today, but we're laughing, right? So
we are laughing.
Yes.
Yeah. So, these children who are generally, above average in intelligence just become hypersensitive to other people's needs. And the challenge for them then when they become adults is to get rid of that false self and figure out who they truly are when there's no more threat of abandonment.
Wow. That's deep. We went deep again. So what is the name of that book again?
It's called Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller.
So Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. Yeah, I think that will be a very Alice. Okay. I think that would be a really powerful resource for many people listening. So I think we're just going to wrap things up because we've we've kind of running out of time. So do you have anything left on your heart or anything that's coming up that you just feel really called to share today?
I guess I would say again that there is, as I know you agree with this, there is always room for a miracle, whether, someone feels like they have some narcissism or someone feels like they're in a really close relationship with somebody who has narcissism. If someone is, someone wants to be honest, open, and willing and gets the right person to work with them, I think great things can happen.
Awesome. So, and if anybody would like to connect with you, how can they do that?
So I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook business page, and I'm on Instagram and Pinterest as well. People can reach out to me there, and anyone can always message me over Facebook Messenger.
Okay. And what is the name of your Facebook page?
So it's Dr. Tristan Sophia, mindset coach and impact strategist.
Wonderful. Okay. And I'll also have your links available under this video. So,
okay.
Dr. Tristan Sophia, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for sharing your insight. Thank you for having this conversation. And I trust that whoever is meant to hear this will benefit from it and will hear it.
Thank you, Carmel.